Hi, everybody. Good morning. Did you sleep well? Oh, you're all going to sleep. I can't see you anymore. We're going to get started with student presentations right now. We have 3 student presenters, 2 of whom are here in person, and 1 who could not attend today. Meredith Moran, we're going to kick things off with. She's a student here at Brown, and I'm going to read her bio. Meredith Moran is a writer and filmmaker based here in Providence. Her writing and new media work examine interactions between humans and technology as sites for both humor and questioning our existing forms of meaning making. Her documentary work strives to highlight socially relevant issues such as aging in rural America, the opioid epidemic, and generational poverty. Her films have been screened internationally at festivals including South by Southwest, Los Angeles Film Festival, Heartland Film Festival, Fastnet Film Festival, Lady Filmmakers Film Festival, and the Pitch Her Productions Riveter series. She's currently a senior at Brown, where she studies modern culture and media and literary arts. Please welcome Meredith.
Thank you, Claire. I'll start by saying that last night I had a dream, and my friends tell me that my dreams are kind of literal, so it was a dream that Thea and John told me to start my presentation in the middle instead of at the beginning. So it was kind of a stress dream. But the second half of it included Thea and John coming up on stage during my presentation and baking a stage-sized chocolate chip cookie. So I don't know what it means, but it was interesting, and we can all just kind of think about that. And before I begin, welcome to Jalen for coming to Brown, and also shout out to Bridget, who can't be here, but her work sounds incredible. Okay, so this is called the buoy. In sailboat racing, there's an effect known as the Coriolis effect. The effect can be explained as follows. 1, different parts of the Earth move at different speeds. 2, in the northern hemisphere, an object flying above the Earth, i.e. the wind, tends to move to the right. In the southern hemisphere, an object tends to move to the left. This effect can help sailboat racers determine the optimal direction to travel on a race course. Say, for example, that a sailor was sailing in North America, and say this sailor was in the middle of a race, and say they were, at this exact moment during which I am referencing, placed in the middle of the fleet. And say they were trying to work their way up in the fleet and win the race, and they did not know which direction to go, and say they remembered said effect, and say they went to the right side of the course, which the Coriolis effect recommends, generally, for those sailing in North America, and say the planet behaved in the most probable way, and all of these moments were pieced together, then it would be likely that said sailor may have a chance to win the race. See Figure 1.1. Figure 1.1, sailor sailing. Our sailor likes to think this effect is one way of understanding the world. Figure 1.2, the world, often messy. The race course on which our sailor is likely sailing is designated by buoys, which can be in the shape of spheres or triangular prisms. We can simplify them into circles and triangles. Figure 1.3, buoy 1, figure 1.4, buoy 2. When sailing, it is important to analyze these individual components of the race course. In order to help our sailor, we can break these buoys down into their constituent parts. Figure 1.5, buoy 1 in the first dimension, i.e. a line. Figure 1.6, buoy 1 in the second dimension, i.e. buoy 1 as buoy 2. Figure 1.7, buoy 1 in the third dimension, footnote. A 3-dimensional buoy is composed of 4 buoys floating above the water and 4 buoys approximately 3 feet below the surface of the water. Second footnote. It is said that the world of the dead resides 3 feet higher than our own. Our sailor believes in the inverse of this sentiment, i.e. 3 feet lower, i.e. inside the 3-dimensional buoy. Before the beginning of a race, our sailor must observe the movement and behavior of the buoys based on the current and the wind. Sailor observes Figure 2.0, 1 buoy talking to another buoy. 3 buoys in a line. 2 buoys playing catch with a 3rd, smaller buoy. 5 buoys in a lineup. 6 buoys making a pyramid in the middle school playground. 2 buoys fucking. 3 polyamorous buoys. 1 buoy, all by itself, teaching our sailor what it means to be alone. When sailing, it is also important for our sailor to pay attention to the wind. Figure 3.0, the wind in its most simplified form, shifting. More behaviors of the wind include the wind as two small identical mountains. Footnote. In his free time, our sailor also enjoys reading religious philosophy. Sailor reads about mountains, which represent a place beyond the physical universes. Second footnote, a place both outside and inside this world, i.e., an absence and a presence. Our sailor likes this sentiment. Figure 3.3, absence dressed up as a circle for the school play. Presence disguised as a circle to avoid questions. Absence talking to herself. Presence posing for a family photo. Absence looking at presence quizzically. Presence looking into the mirror. Absence looking into the mirror. Presence trying to give absence a hug. Absence crying, lonely. Figure 3.12, the shape of the water created by the wind, i.e. the waves. Footnote, wind creates texture on the water. Our sailor also loves Eve Sedgwick. Remembering her book Touching Feeling, our sailor notes how Sedgwick distinguishes between two types of texture. One, texture with one X, and two, texture with two. Texture with two X's contains a trace of its source within its appearance. Texture's origin is an onomatopoeia. Boom, cuckoo, sizzle, our sailor says to himself. Part 2, or one giant footnote. The buoy. Once, after presenting this piece, someone said that they thought I was trying to say something personal. Figure 4.1, me trying to say something personal. So I started to think about what I actually wanted to say and what was actually sayable. I thought about language. I thought about people. And how the world is full of them. And how I'm actually scared of patterns made up of tiny circles. And how the freckles on my left forearm look kind of like this. I thought about my family. Figure 5.2, my family. And I thought about my mom. Mom. I thought about how sometimes when I'm sad, she'll say something helpful. Figure 5.4, something helpful. And how sometimes when I'm sad, she'll say something unhelpful. Figure 5.5, something unhelpful. How after 21 years of human life, I've been sad lots of times. Figure 5.6, me, being sad. Like when my dog Jazzy died. Jazzy. And Mom said, the world of the dead resides 3 feet higher than our own, i.e., helpful. And when my best friend moved to France. Figure 5.8, best friend moving left to right. And Mom said, you're lucky to have a friend you love so much that it makes saying goodbye so hard, i.e., helpful. And when I had a crush on a boy who didn't like me back. Figure 5.9, me having a crush part 1. And then when I had a crush on a girl who didn't like me back. Figure 5.10, me having a crush part 2. And how Mom said lots of helpful and unhelpful things. How sometimes she likes to disguise the helpful things in an attempt to make the unhelpful things in an attempt to make them look helpful. And then I thought about the buoy, figure 5.11, the buoy. How the buoy gets to live all kinds of lives, i.e., the buoy's many lives. How I get to live one, my life. How parts of it are conflicting parts, converging painfully. How the person who thought I was trying to write something personal would probably tell me to be specific. Figure 5.15, me trying to say something specific. Okay, so here we have this diagram, and in the upper left circle is people who are from Texas, in the upper right, people who are queer, and the bottom, people who talk about it. Now, section A, between people who are from Texas and people who are queer, that's me in 2015. Section B, people who are queer and people who talk about it, all of my idols. Section C, people who are from Texas and people who talk about it, that's the more obnoxious members of my family. And section D, people who are from Texas, people who are queer, and people who talk about it, that's me in 2019 now, most of the time. And I thought about how Mom's response to me moving from A to D, i.e. coming out, which happened during my first year of college, while I was on the phone, standing in the back of CVS on Thayer Street, picking out shampoo, was, that's fine. I just don't want this to ruin your time at Brown, i.e. unhelpful. But she'd say it was helpful, so let's qualify it as the following. It kind of reminded me of the time I told her I wanted to stop sailing. Figure 6.1, me and mom. Figure 6.2, me telling mom I wanted to stop sailing, and how she didn't let me for years. Year 1, year 2, etc. Probably because dad is a sailor. Figure 6.6, dad. And she wanted me to have a good relationship with dad. Again, she must have thought she was being helpful. But, as we've already learned from our sailor, the world, i.e. one really big buoy, is often messy. And then I thought about what is and isn't personal, like how I love my family, somewhat personal, despite all of the unhelpful stuff they've said over the years, more personal. And then I thought about how love can be lots of things, very personal, like this, or 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 this. And I thought about how someone recently told me that if I want to understand love, I need to read a book by this mathematician. Figure 7.1, me giving the idea some thought. Figure 7.2, me deciding against it for now. Instead, I think I'll ask the buoy. Figure 1.1, the buoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. That was stunning and brilliant. So Jalen and I are going to introduce Bridget Hawkins. I'm going to read Bridget's bio, and then Jalen's going to read a statement that Bridget wrote about the two works that you'll see. Bridget Hawkins is a New Jersey native who lives in Brooklyn. She is currently completing her senior year at Pratt Institute, earning a BFA in writing. Her poem, Anemic, was the winner of the Academy of American Poets 2018 College and University Poetry Prize, and her graphic story, Tell Her Anyway, is featured in the Simon & Schuster 2018 anthology, It Occurs to Me, I Am America. As a biracial Black woman living in America, Bridget's poetry often confronts issues of race and marginality, engaging a range of forms and genres. And I will pass the mic to Jalen Strong to read Bridget's.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. How are you? Okay, that's what I like. I'm going to read Bridget's statement. The language of colonialism is ubiquitous, as are the oppression it inflicts. It is a language of violence, acquisition, and profit. It reframes history and removes voices. It feels important to me as a poet, me being Bridget, and as a brown body in a system that devalues and demonizes brownness, to resist the revisionism inherent to this form of language making by demonstrating its insidious hypocrisy. These poetic videos, American Capitalism and Circe's, detourn, juxtapose, and collage language from sources of oppression, forcing within them room for reality. The violent removal of people from their homes, the police brutality in neighborhoods of color, the means through which the suffering Black body is translated into product. The language of colonialism thrives under the assumption that it is the single voice of history. Be it in a video that hails gentrification as quote-unquote development, or in erasing from rum and white sugar the bloody inhumanity of the plantations that bore them. Challenging that assumption by speaking back is the means through which I bear witness to others' hardships, enact eulogy, and make rageful resistance. And now, I want to show Bridget's video, but I gotta change this little adapter. So bear with me. As we bear witness, bear with me. How'd everybody sleep? I slept pretty good. Did anybody have good dreams? Meredith did, right? Look at that photo of me. What's my password? These are Bridget's videos. I kind of named them today, just now, for her. But this is just my interpretation of it. They're interdisciplinary videos of resistance.
Hey everybody!
This is American capitalism, colonial variety. Yield, one delicious rum cake, perfect for summer soiree, serves up to 10 or 450 years, give and take. Cake, 1 cup butter, ½ cup lynching fat, 3 cups sugar scalds on skin, 5 large pox, 3½ cups crop extinction, profit, ½ teaspoon gunpowder, 1 cup homogenized milk, 4th cup dark rum, can substitute with 3/5 pound dark chattel flesh, 1 teaspoon extracted vanilla, profit, ½ cup cultivated pecans, profit. Glaze, 1 cup cane machete through leg, ½ cup butter, 4th cup insurance drowning, profit, 4th cup rum, 18 years and most likely. Preheat oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Grease entire 140-ton hold and line bottom with flesh. Watch for wood rot and boring worms. Airflow is important. In large bowl, beat flesh and fat at medium-high speed with whip until creamy. Gradually add labor, beating until dead. Add labor, boiling, one at a time, beating well after each new. In a medium bowl, combine pox and gunpowder, overmix. Apply liberally to area until texture changes. In a small bowl, combine flesh and other flesh for new flesh. Also apply liberally. Gradually add pox mixture to powder mixture, alternately with labor mixture, beginning and ending with profit, beating well after each new. Pour batter into prepared stocks. Take pecans, vanilla, profit. Repeat this liberally. Bake 1 hour and 10 to 15 minutes, or until point inserted into eye comes away clean. In a medium bowl, combine all flesh for rum glaze. Bring to boil over Caribbean heat. Add labor until sugar is dissolved, about 6 months of the year. Pierce top 8 to 10 times with a thin iron. Pour boiling rum glaze over. Let cool in stocks for 15 minutes. Remove from stocks, invert onto wire rack, and let rot liberally. Serve cake, profit side up.
Until next time, y'all.
Okay, that is American Capitalism. That is her first piece, and it is followed by, we went over this a couple times, but I can't, Xerxes. So quote Xerxes. Language is interesting, and I pronounced that wrong, so here's Xerxes.
You want to come in here? You ain't never coming here. It's basically about people who have more money. Buildings around the corner that used to have lower income black people. At least 20 new real estate offices in the last 3 years. Night and day, 2 different neighborhoods. I can't really appreciate it. All I know is it's gonna affect my rent. A lot of us were raised in Bed-Stuy, no longer able to afford to purchase home, and they taken
Day in the neighborhood to find out why Bed-Stuy is one of the fastest growing areas in Brooklyn.
properties coming up. Every time you look around, they on the tell.
It has that neighborhood vibe still.
One guy came down with a bag, literally a bag of money, opened the bag and said, "If you want to sell your house, I'll give you this much." I had this house for 40-something years. Now all of a sudden, you want to come in and take it. If you're poor, it may seem like a lot, but it's a small amount of money. It's like harassment. My landlord sold my property, I believe, and he didn't tell me why. This property over 40 years, now all of a sudden, you want to drop our insurance. Tell me why. At one point, I ended up robbing the structure with 4 people.
People around here are, creatives, or they work.
That's what they're doing. Insurance companies go into people's houses, saying their house is condemned. They look at the money, and until other people came here across the water, all of a sudden, if I wanted to sell my house, I would have gave it to them. I'm not dealing with them. They don't necessarily know what they're giving us. So where are we going with this? They don't even speak to you. For the better part of 20 years, you're not coming to my house. Hell no. The church had gotten to the point where it was unsafe and I couldn't afford it. There was nothing I could do to save it. So where are we going with this? We didn't have no problem. I'm losing some of that, and that is problematic. No, you can't come into my house. This loss of interpersonal intimacy. No, you can't come into my house. Intimacy that home has always had. You can't.
All right, and that is Xerxes and Bridget in spirit right next to me.
And now I'm going to introduce Jalen, the second Jalen. Jalen Strong is a sophomore at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and I've had the great privilege and pleasure of instructing him for the past 2 semesters. And we always joke in class that when Jalen speaks, it's so eloquent that a semio textbook gets written in each class session, and you're going to be privy to that in a moment. He is a seeker, a body that breathes, and a companion to truth. He works in the realm of writing and art, but is most fascinated by our profound connections to each other. He lives in Brooklyn. Please welcome him to the stage once more.
Whoever that last person was that was up here did not do a good job. I don't think he shouldn't have been in the interrupt at all, right? No, I'm kidding. Thank you, Claire. I really appreciate that, and I'm really grateful to be here in this space, speaking words that could be semiotext, that could be truth, that could be anything. Because isn't that what words are? Anything. Today, I will be sharing with you all a project called Unburial Begun. But before that, I would first like to reintroduce myself. My name is Jalen Strong. I'm a Pratt sophomore. My practice involves writing, and lately video language arts and video projects, sort of, which is really interesting to experiment in. I want to also acknowledge that we exist on settler colonial land throughout all of America. Specifically, I believe that this part of Rhode Island is Wampanoag territory or Narragansett, which I'm not very knowledgeable on that actually, so I'm going to read up on whose land this is. Along with land acknowledgement, I do want to also acknowledge what I like to call and what others like to call the system of domination in which we exist under, which is the imperialist white supremacist patriarchy, which is ever pervasive and ever seeping into our bodies in various ways. Unbury or begun. 1. On my travels here to Rhode Island, to which I have never been, I noticed a sight that I found interesting. There was a barnyard home, overgrown by the limbs of bare winter brush plants. It was rusted red and had slithers of white trim and dusty blue paneling. Red, white, blue. At first I wondered, why do people abandon houses? What might have happened to a house that makes you want to leave it be and never return? My first answer, and obviously there was no one to talk to on this bus since I was asking myself questions and answering them all in the same breath. My first answer was that a house becomes left when an evil starts to brew in the foundation. It sounds harsh, yeah, but I trusted my initial answer. Houses hold the energy of the people inside. If your body holds a love, your home does. If your body holds a hate, your home does. And now that that particular home is empty, waiting to be healed, and the limbs, the arms, and the hands of the bushes, they are brown from the roots up. And someday these wild plants will overgrow and take the house with them into the ground from which it came, like how all things return to the wholeness of the earth. The red, white, and blue house that has been left void and sits on this land so cluttered with the colonial, native, and slave energy. It will be interrupted by the brown hands raising from the soil. It will be reclaimed. This American history will be reclaimed and repurposed for the future. So Unbury or Begun is an exploration in bodies, really, in Black bodies, in brown bodies, in the bodies that exist together on this world with our profound connections to each other, which I am very interested in. This work specifically is bearing witness to the violent coercion exerted onto Black bodies via history, via the present, and not the future. There's an uncontrolled sourness that festers along the pink, fleshy insides of our bodies and crawls around the mind. I question daily, how can we recognize the rage that collects from a past and present that holds a posture of dominance, and how can we undo what the future holds? How do we understand anger, emotion? And how do we understand specifically anger? Because anger is the making of a color. We associate anger with a color, mostly. And yet, in the color Black, we make it invisible. It is not a stream of light from the rainbow. It is a danger to those in power. I want to unbury the trauma of the corporeal and unlock a self-preserved beginning. So this project specifically takes upon the slave daguerreotypes of Louis Agassiz, and they were commissioned by Joseph T. Zealy. Pictured here is the Agassiz house on the Harvard campus that functions still to this day as sort of a theater. And theater is really interesting to think about the history of theater and how performance happens in theaters. My good friend Louis, right next to it, fuck him. The slave daguerreotypes and the daguerreotype portrait was the first pragmatic way in which to manifest a permanent image. One had to capture the photo on a camera obscura and develop it onto a silver-plated copper sheet, fume it with mercury vapor, chemical treat it, and rinse and dry and let it sit, and from it arose a frozen moment. Louis Agassiz, a Swiss ethnologist who in the mid-19th century grew interested in the great debate of American slavery. He migrated to America with his grandeur of scientific rigor, and upon his moving gained association with Dr. Samuel Morton, the spearheader of the racialized polygenesis theory that claimed separate species creation, like bodily creation for different people that weren't white, that they were created separately to prove white superiority, which is crazy. And embraced by Morton, and his first sighting of black men triggered the curiosity and contempt that birthed the slave daguerreotypes. Agassiz then came in contact with a man named Robert Gibbs in the South at a ethnologist and like American conference around science. And Gibbs, who was a friend of slave owners in South Columbia, introduced him to Zealy, who was the photographer, and then they went to the B.F. Taylor plantation to commission these photographs. And after the photographs were taken in March of 1850, it takes a while for the daguerreotype to be processed because it's 19th century and photos took forever. So in a letter, Zealy wrote, I've just finished the daguerreotypes for Agassiz of native Africans of various tribes. I wish you could see them. 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 4. This diagram is not in Glidden's type of mankind. I bring this photo into this presentation only because it's another form of racial typology, and it's very related to the idea of white science that seek to like denigrate every other body that wasn't white, from animals to the native Negro to quote unquote the Mongolian to the native person to quote unquote the Hottentot to the Native American, and here it goes European, native, Negro, Hottentot. And there's the diagram of the skulls, which is really, I don't know if you think about what the skull contains, is the mind. And within the mind holds all the trauma and holds all the knowledge of self and of history, and I think that's just something to think about. This photo is one of the first daguerreotypes paired by what may appear to everybody as just a black blank screen. But what I did with the daguerreotype was I took the original found archival image on the internet and I processed it and basically, to simplify it, I colored over the original daguerreotype and juxtaposed these two images to sort of provide commentary on what it means to both take a portrait of somebody and specifically take a portrait, and how that both renders, at least in this process, it renders them both visible and hyper-visible. You cannot look at this photo. It pierces into your irises first. A glossy estrangement builds around his eyelids, a look of terror and tears and nothing much else. I know he has not said a word for some time now. His rage is silent, within the throat, freezing in the esophagus and turning the vocal cords glacial. There is a tension on the skin that stretches, a black beaten by the flare of the solar southern sun and plated lash, both bone-thin and exhausted muscle from the toils of a certain domination when looking for too long. For too long. He begins to look like my father's father as he lied on his deathbed. The same type of joylessness in his clenched jaw, stripped naked by the white imagination to knit a lie within his portrait. The unrelentless eye of white science, colonizing his skin, the gaze, undeniably afraid and aroused by the black body. I want to weave a dream where he reclaims his name, where he is never sold into slavery from the Congo, where he lived among his people in the land that he was native to, free as free can be conceived, free as free can be conceived. As air flows with an intention of making a wind, as ocean makes a wave from itself, as sun makes light at the first minute of dawn, he is human. Her face has monopolized my mind in such a way that it travels to my chest. The beat of my heart is no longer silent, it is a drum alarm, a sound of urgency that consumes me. This is my rage, directly from the heart. I've been trying to build a new realm. A narrative that destroys this one where they have unzipped her gown. I've been trying to change history from the future. I've been trying not to cry when she stares at me and asks for help, when I can do nothing but weep alongside her and wish and wish and wish for a fiery sentence to hell of her oppressor. She is so much more than this daguerreotype for experiment. She is no slave, a god, a god, a god, a god, a god, a god, a god if there was one. I can tell the tenderness of her skin. I can tell it is soft like the skin of the mothers that I come from. I can tell that her hair feels just like mine. Half of her is floating into the abyss and the other is trying to crawl its way out, dreaming of a night sky so bright it'll burn the plantation. Dreaming of revolution, dreaming of her kin, dreaming of dancing, of drums, dreaming of rhythm, dreaming of a world without sin. And so what I did with the daguerreotypes was, in order to sort of reclaim the past and recontextualize the past, I decided not at all to embody what it meant to be these people. Not at all, but to rather take my own ancestral energy of people that look just like me, of people that look just like my father and my mother, and the lineage that I do not have actually, and place that into these photos, into these Polaroid photos specifically, because if you know the design of the Polaroid, it's a cell, it's 4x4, and it captures your photo and it locks you in there, and you can't escape unless you have the very will to. So I think that what I was attempting to do is to take these photographs and put myself into this cell with this type of intentionality that I can be in this photo and I can be stagnant, I can be put into history, I can be placed into history, I can be unmoved by history, but I can take that photo and I can walk out. Because that is not what these people were able to do. To undig, first find the whole, discover the abyss of this flesh, the deep obsidian part, the gutty proportions tucked behind the rib cage, the heart, and the artery inside the skin is another obstacle. To undig, first find the past, discover the lash of tongues, the tar of scalp, the reflection that burns, the body beaten, the body that beats back. Granddaddy always told me to be like the white boys. Granddaddy always told me to be like the boys. Granddaddy always told me to be like the boys. Granddaddy always told me to be like the boys. Granddaddy always told me to be like the boys. The boys, he said, go to college, own things, have what they want on their fingers. The axis of the world spins. The throne belongs to them. They come from a lineage of what we cannot have. We cannot have a lineage. We only have a drowned history. From the water we have come, and from the water we will return. Be like the boys, swim. The kingdom come for them. Ain't no kingdom ever came for me. Ain't nobody gonna kiss the blackness of your feet. Granddaddy said, make that blackness flee. Beat it out of you. Let it grow legs. Crawl from the surface of you and plague some other fool. Once the skin has fled, write a eulogy for your tongue, untie it, make it loose, adopt the flesh of their mouths, sit up straight, wear your belt, tuck your shirt, comb your hair. For God's sake, let the teeth swallow the coil of your hair. Don't you want to make your mother's mouth reach the end of her eardrums? Don't you want to be somebody? Don't you see me? These eyes are old enough to see behind your neck. And I actually won't show that, but it's 5 minutes. Is that too long? Okay, so that was the end of Unburial Begun, and it's still a working project, still very much so. And I think that to place myself within the context of history is immensely laboring, emotionally and physically, and to think about the lineage of blackness in this country is something, I think it's the Oxford Dictionary that quoted, I forget which version of it, but under the word black, just the color black, the example sentence or whatever you may call that in the dictionary, it was quoted that black was a word of a difficult history. And I think about that a lot. I think about that constantly, especially under these, the context of like this American history, and what that means, and how wounded this world is, because none of us are free. None of us are free as long as the idea of power is still attached to bodies who don't want power. I don't think any of us want power. I think what we all seek, this desire, this love within us, this radical love, this self-preservation, is in search for a grander, greater sense of love. And so I do want to provide this last sort of video work, because I think it was very much in conversation with Unburial Begun, and it happened after. To quickly depict it, it was, there's this thing that has been happening on Instagram, on this platform in which we display projections of ourselves, wherein white bodies, white European bodies specifically, like Swiss people and some American people, were basically promoting and engaging in this neo-blackface, where they use makeup and self-tanning to completely and utterly visibly become brown. And I think it's really interesting to think about the idea of doing this and being able to wipe it away in the vanity in the mirror, and how people of this difficult history who are in this place and under these systems of domination, just like me and you and just like everybody else, can sort of step between the line of power and powerlessness. I'm just going to play this and I'll be done. in between this part is sort of a triptych poem in which I do an embodiment of voice between myself and mythological character of like a plantation owner, and then a response to that. And it seems to not be playing, but I kind of enjoy that aspect of it being this blank white screen. And so it goes. And so it goes. Isn't this the best interruption? And so it goes, and there it goes. Thank you.
We have quite a bit of time. I hope the audience has questions. But I thought I would begin with a few questions to kick us off. Thank you so much to Meredith and Jalen and Bridget in absentia. The work was really amazing. I think we should give it another round of applause. Yeah, and I actually loved the interruption on the last piece and was thinking about Jackie Wang's commentary on the weaponization of time and how that intersects with whiteness, and it's making me think of your Venn diagrams. To dive in, I was wondering, both of your pieces feel really meticulously researched in ways that are different and perhaps overlapping at the same time, and I was wondering if you could talk about your research processes. I know a bit about yours. I don't know as much about yours, Meredith. Do you want to start?
I can start. How's this? Okay, I'll leave that. Okay, research. So, interestingly, I wrote the piece mostly in a modern culture and media seminar called What is Sex? And I don't think my professor knew I was doing this, but I was doing it, and we were reading a lot of, just text on different theory about sex and being, but also like how that intersects with language. And so that was kind of like a theoretical backdrop. And then, kind of beyond that, I was really inspired by some different like kind of auto fiction works or people that were writing like confessional work, and I really like Samantha Irby, who does a good job kind of bridging this gap between like humor and then really resonant material. And then I like Maggie Nelson for her ability to weave in theory, and then Jennifer Egan, actually, the second to last chapter in A Visit from the Goon Squad was really inspirational because she does this kind of series of flow charts, and so I really liked how she could tell a narrative that way. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Bridget, but something I observed as watching Bridget's piece was perhaps this peripatetic mode of research. Like Xerxes seems gleaned from the graffiti that she encounters, right? So yeah, that connecting the dots. I'll pass the wand to you, the research wand.
As far as research goes, it was a bit difficult to find text that I think that, at least my research was very textual. It was very read and ingest and find what exactly that I wanted to know and what exactly could I reject from that history. And so thinking about all this written history about what had occurred in the production of these like photos it was very laboring. It was very hard to do, and not necessarily that the textual work was dense, because it was very straight to the point, but rather the history was dense, and working around how to interpret that was dense. And I think that I know I'm so grateful for the research process of it because it's the foundation of that work, and it really allows that work to breathe in which it should. And I forgot to mention that those photos were first discovered in 1975 by catalogers in the Harvard Peabody archives. And then in 1991, Carrie Mae Weems was allowed into the archives and was told not to photograph or not to take anything out of it. And she discovered the daguerreotypes, and she did exactly the opposite of what she was told, and thank God, or thank whoever allowed her to do that, because then she recontextualized the photos in an exhibit called From Here I Saw What Happened and Cried. And if it wasn't for Carrie Mae, then it wouldn't really be possible to really engage in it again and engage in those photos again.
Have you visited Harvard and been to those archives yet, or do you plan?
Yeah, I definitely have planned to, for sure. Yeah, I've never been on this side of the world, this American world. This is my first time in Rhode Island, and you know Boston is just up, so soon I will.
Stones throw. Does the audience have questions? I have others, but I want to open things up to you first. Yes, Stephanie.
Can you create the poem that was interrupted and then you know well enough to get the snare?
Maybe. I can talk about it, or I can wing it. Okay. Wow.
I believe in you.
Thank you. There's a part in the embodiment of like it's basically a made-up character of like a southern like religious pastor, and there's this one position with the white screen, and it in the middle it jumps to the black part and it goes.
Can you stand up and hold it like a
I'll lean into the mic. I won't stand up. I don't want to decentralize anything, create a hierarchy. Black be nothing and nothing be black. 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 White be nothing and nothing be white. White be nothing and nothing be white. A thing of the past, a thing of power, and yet there be bodies hanging on to the strings of it for dear life, for power. And that's that part. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions, requests? Yes,
Can I ask a question? I was wondering about animation. I think that in all theories we saw a lot of movement and exploration with like timing and how things came in and out of the screen, controlled to different levels. And I learned in this class at Brown by Gertrude Koch this theory that animation is something we do in our bodies and then project onto an art piece. And that is like the anima and animating quality. And I was wondering how Jalen and Meredith think about that, like how much of the role of animating the text and activating the text is coming from the device and not just being asked by other people, and how just from your body. Animation.
Okay, I can start. Well, yeah, it's a great question. When I started working on this piece, it was definitely like existed very much on the page, and I was in Thea's class working on it. And we had the assignment of doing like a video essay, and I came in and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, read this text as a PowerPoint and show it to people and see, okay, how can I translate this to video form? But, in doing that, decided that it is kind of a video as it exists as a presentation. And I personally feel like I much prefer it now, reading it out loud and, having shown some friends and then having read it. Yeah, I think it exists more like in an embodied space. So
I loved it. me and Meredith met yesterday. We're best friends now. We're best friends. And the buoy was so interesting, especially in the terms of like quote unquote animation. And at first, I understand that it's in two parts, but at first, it really functioned as sort of, it was almost like the theoretical turning into the physical, turning into the animation or the animated body. So thank you for that. It's very good. Like you said, coming from the body, we all have bodies. I think that's the one thing that we can all say in this room is that we have a body and we inhabit a body. And I think that, at least in the sort of negotiating and tethering of animation, of color, of form, of like body, that, like you said, all of that comes from this part of you, and really having that displayed into video work in which things move, in which movement happens, is not only reflective of the inner body and of everything that happens, but also of like of interpretation, and how interpretation is moving throughout these temporalities of like the work that we do, and how they get reimagined, especially in like different parts. And I noticed that like in the first part of the buoy, it's this one interpretation of it, and then the second is another interpretation. And in my work, there's several interpretations because it's historical, and it's like the only way that I can create it is if I manipulate it for all the good reasons to manipulate it. So yeah.
Your question? Yeah.
Hey, it's related to Thea's question, but the question here would be, you both engage images and text. So just in terms of maybe the interruption in modes or the disruption, how do you think of the relationship between both modes of approaching the material that you present? Do you think of the visual as a way of interrupting the textual material you're presented with? Are they, do they have an antagonistic relationship, those two modes? Is it a productive antagonism, or are they supporting each other? In both series, how do you think about it?
Well, I'll start with saying I was so struck by, with what you presented, how there was such like a complement between the poetry you were reading and the images at the same time, and I kind of liked that, they really did work together so well. And I wouldn't have wanted to necessarily just see them or just hear, but like hear you read alongside the images. I feel like for my piece with the buoy, I was thinking a lot about writing kind of outside of like, I don't know how to describe, like outside of the line, or like kind of breaking out of representation and writing on these maybe other dimensions that seemed like the only way to really do that was through an image or a visual, right? And like, how can I establish this new language of like circles relating to each other and, make something out of that instead of just like text read across the page from left to right. So yeah, that was what I was thinking about.
They're in like, at least in our works, they're, like you said, they work in certain ways. And I think that in the general thinking about language, like literal words and then images, literal pictures, the general population, general knowledge, I think, people hate to see words and pictures together. They either want to see pictures or they want to see words. And the only time they want them together is when the words are subtitles, or when the words directly describe the image, when the words are captioning the image. So when you provide in our work, when you use text to not only describe but text as also an image, it's interesting in that way. And I think that text in itself is very well an image. And what we categorize as images, like a photograph, is also working in both ways. A photograph is both words and a picture. So I think that what I like to play with is the idea of language as photographic or language as embodying becoming color or becoming a picture or becoming something, because they're the same thing and they're also completely different. And I think, I don't know, it's really interesting to work in those modes and those registers to really challenge the viewer. It's all about the audience, and it's all about not only the audience, but the creator of it and their intentionality of language and words. And,
I appreciate too how Meredith, your work, letter forms are images and they're animate. They feel like they have motion, even if they're not moving. Yeah, I mean, they do move, and then we have these static moments where things feel like they're moving, like when the letter forms are raining down the page. But also your diagrams, those are letters, they're circles, but the circle is also a letter.
I feel like we should just address Bridget's work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there you have the moving image, the really moving image where the language was continuous, and then it took over. You know, you knew a recipe was being acted out and spoken, and then that language was replaced with very contextually appropriate language that was providing really strong critique and commentary. So there was seamlessness between language and image there. It came from the source, but also was used for the art. It was a little bit different from sort of cutting back and forth. That some of Meredith's and Jalen's work. Seamless but violently. Yeah. Right, yeah. But just sort of formally different from, definitely from Meredith's.
Yeah, it was also interesting that, you know, she had this, like the title of the piece as a part of the image too, right? Like the tag of graffiti was like embedded in the image, which was kind of interesting.
Or it's part of the stream, right? I think the language there has a different momentum.
Did she do that, or did Jalen give you that for this time? As the titles and she gave them?
The titles are her titles, and Jalen, I believe you put them in a PowerPoint, and the titles were living.
The title of the presentation was my interpretation of it, like the interdisciplinary as resistance. That was mine. The titles of the videos were a Bridget's creation and a Bridget's mind, and I think they work really well in that way. And I like that you said stream, because there is a certain momentum in the videos, and there's a certain amount of movement without the visual text, and like you brought to our attention, at least in the second piece, she's literally moving with the camera instead of like the found images and the found videos from the first piece. So if we're taking the second piece specifically, she's moving it and she frames it with our little devices. She frames it within this and within the camera mode, within this, and she begins something that's really interesting, and that fact is that our gaze, and not a specific gaze, but the gaze of today, of 2019, the gaze of technology, and she frames it within the context of gentrification and urbanization. And she goes down a street to which I'm really familiar. She goes down Quincy Street in Bed-Stuy. I know exactly where she is from the start of that video to the end, and she captures a neighborhood that is, for lack of a better word, that is dying. I work right on the corner of one of those videos, and every day there's construction of brand new condominiums that aren't sustainable for living for anybody, and yet we place people and we hoard them in it. And I think that's really her larger commentary via the language that isn't displayed but it is spoken. And I think it's terribly genius, for lack of a better word. I wish she was here to speak more on it, because I can only say but so much.
I'm thinking too about the stream, right? The stream of consciousness, or the stream that we're talking about in terms of the audio as a digital stream, right? Or a stream that witnesses, as opposed to just this like audio water running through the text. Yeah, stream of the collective unconscious. Are there other questions from the audience? I should check the time also. Or did I bring that? So it's 12:14. We have about 15 minutes. I'm going to ask a few more questions. I'm curious about your interactions with communities as part of your studies, like the learning communities wherein you made these films, friend artists with whom you're in dialogue as you make. What communities are important to you? And in what communities did these pieces burgeon?
Sure. So, yeah, I think I'm kind of straddling two different communities. One being the community here at Brown, right, and working in digital language art and thinking about, communities of like queer friends and people I talk to at school in Rhode Island, and then community in Texas that's definitely influenced a lot of the things that I write about, even though, sometimes it's like harder to talk about things with community in Texas. And so something that I was really thinking about with this piece was like how to talk about things that are tough and like hard, and how to talk about things with certain communities, that are easier, maybe in like Brown's kind of liberal environment versus conservative environment in Texas. So.
I definitely, I get the idea of like being in different communities, and in terms of like creating specifically, there's many communities that we all exist in, and it's like endless sometimes. But I think the main communities that I think in or are allowed in are the community of self, so my own being and all the thoughts that I get to have as a person and as a privileged person in my ableness. The community of self, obviously the community of Pratt, obviously, or not so obviously, the communities in which I engage in where I live, and that can be considered two places. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I have grown up for some time in my life in Brooklyn, and being in a community that's changing and ever changing is very difficult. And then the community of my hometown being like Prince George's County, Maryland, which is right outside of DC. So there's a lot of commentary within that. And just like being in all these spaces and actively trying to change them all for the better. And I think that's what art does, what our art does, what occupation does, what our ability to think does. I think it for lack of a better word, is about change, and about like how do we change these communities for the better via progress and via art and via language specifically, because words are how we communicate, and if we're going to use words, we have to use words cautiously and with so much. They have so much prowess, and just thinking about pedagogy and learning via words and via loving words too. Words that are via an ethic of love. So yeah.
That's lovely. In closing, we were joking we were going to do the 36 questions. Oh, there's a question. Never mind. I'm gonna stop. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to, because what you said, Jalen, you also said something about a podium, where I wanted to ask you more about it. The question is, do you really feel that people don't want power? Could you maybe explore that or explain that? Kind of intriguing. Sometimes I think, well, yeah, actually they do want.
I think power, in the sense that I'm talking about, is inherited, and is an inheritance, specifically in the context of the work, is thinking about the American production of power, and thus, following the American production of power, the global production of power. And under these systems of domination, which not too many people really actively, or at least in today's world is changing, but the idea of the phenomenon of whiteness and what that means for all bodies and not just white bodies. The idea that power and privilege are innately inherited specifically by those who have white bodies, and that changes a lot, especially in the spectrum of like oppression. If we're thinking about what specifically coined by first, like bell hooks, the imperialist white supremacy patriarchy. It's like an all-encompassing phrase that does away with the idea of like racism is the only issue, because racism centers and holds on a pedestal the idea of white people being the utmost issue. But I think the issue is not the person, but the system. Like per se, right now in America, Donald Trump, the president of these United States, has power, but only because it is granted to him. And there's this thing in our minds today that fetishizes the man and not the system that produces him. So it's like thinking about a plant. There's a seed, and then there's what grows from the plant. The seed being this pervasive whiteness, this pervasive idea of white supremacy. And what is growing from it is this power, and that plant is rotten. And that plant has to be dug up. And that plant has to be transported and be healed in a certain type of way. Because what we're lacking in this society is healing, and what we're lacking is this ability to talk about it. Because because power is so, at least in our construction of it, power is so evil. And I don't think anybody wants that at all. I don't think anybody physically wants to say, I have more power than this person, I have more power than this body, because how productive is that? How exactly are we going to grow and heal together if one person is in this chair, is right there, and is looking specifically at me, or is in this chair looking at Claire or looking at Meredith and says, I have more power than you. Whether you're knowingly saying it, unknowingly, whether you're overtly saying it, or whether you're innately saying it. Because you don't have to speak to say something. Having a body and having an orientation of that body within this world is language enough.
I'm thinking too about the flower pot, right? Like a plant can only grow so much in a flower pot.
Mm-hmm.
You need to uproot it and
put it somewhere else.
Yeah, as part of that unpacking.
Right.
Question. To close, does anybody have further questions? I have a closing question. In closing, what is one question you would wish somebody would ask you that you haven't yet been asked, that you want to answer?
So you say yours, and I'll ask you.
Beautiful.
And then you, okay. Right.
Symbiosis. Oh, that's a good question. Question to be asked. Well, you kind of already asked me this, but not in this context. Something that I'm interested in kind of exploring is like if I've shown my mother this piece, and if I haven't, and like how to talk to her about the piece. So, I don't know if you want to.
Meredith, have you showed your mother?
I have not, and I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to.
And where is the dream
Show her.
in this?
Oh yeah, and can someone interpret my dream or ask me more about it?
Thea is the mother and John is the father.
Okay, Jalen, what's your question?
I think that I want someone in this world to ask me, every day I think, I want someone to ask me, did I love today? Did you love today? Did you love something or something?
Did you love today?
Hell yeah. Who was that? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I like easy questions.
We saw it. We bore witness.
Ask me if I loved today.
Did you love today?
Yes, I love your piece. I love being in this space. Did you love today?
Yes, I loved your piece as well, Jalen, and being in the space, and Bridget's piece. So.
Did you all love today? I think that's a good note on which to end. Yeah.
You're right.
And is made from an ethic of love and care, I think. Thank you so, so much. This was amazing. Yeah, give it up for Jalen and Meredith.